am Greg Dember, and this is one of a series of What is Metamodern Conversations, or WIM Conversations for short. And my cohort in all of this is Linda Ceriello.
Hi, Greg.
And our special guest today is Stephanie Lepp.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Stephanie.
Hi.
Yeah, so today our conversation partner, Stephanie Lepp, I'll introduce and tell why we invited her here and are pleased to talk with her today. So some of the great things that Stephanie has done include, but are not limited to, in February 2016, Stephanie started Where I'm Coming From, an experiment in offering testimony and bearing witness to a city and imagining civic rituals and healing in service of a collective urban future of people who dwell in a city together, designed to build empathy by speaking other people's perspectives in the first person. And then another project of Stephanie's is the Infinite Lunchbox, which is, you can correct me if I get any of this wrong, Stephanie, but it's both the name of your studio where you're an artist. It's like a container for your artworks and has been in existence since 2016, and is also a YouTube channel called Infinite Lunchbox, which, and I'm just quoting from you here, offers a heterodox and hopeful perspective on current events. My sense is that it is mostly video essay type of presentations, and the common thread being something I very much enjoyed. You said, making lemonade with this moment.
That's a good sign if I make myself laugh. Yes, that is accurate. Yes.
Okay, good. And then you have another podcast called Reckonings, and we'll talk about the content of that podcast as we go along. And then one of your recent projects is called Deep Reckonings. This one described as a series of explicitly marked deep fake videos that imagine a couple of high-profile public figures having a reckoning with themselves, owning up to either lies they've told or harm that they've caused, or both. So yeah, we're really excited to talk about your work and about how it reflects metamodern sensibilities. Again, welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you. So excited to be here. I'm excited to see my work through metamodern eyes.
Yeah, so just so that we're all on the same page and our viewers kind of are on the same page with us, I just want to give a little nutshell of what the term metamodernism means to us for the purposes of this conversation and our series in general. And then we'll get into the actual stuff that we're here to talk about. So metamodernism is a cultural period and a cultural sensibility exemplified by artworks and cultural products that seem to protect personal interiority or felt experience from the reductionism of modernism and from the relativism of postmodernism, often by braiding together qualities of the modern sensibility and the postmodern sensibility. So whether it's a song, a film, a television show, a painting, a slang term, or any form of discourse, you'll find braiding of modernist and postmodern dualities like modernist earnestness and postmodern irony, conviction and relativism, unification and fragmentation, etc. As a cultural period, metamodernism is often thought to have begun a few years before the turn of the millennium in the late 90s, showing up in TV shows like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, musicians like Elliott Smith and Sufjan Stevens, filmmakers like Miranda July and Wes Anderson, novelists like Dave Eggers and Jennifer Egan, and a lot of kind of multi-talented Renaissance figures such as Donald Glover, who musically is known as Childish Gambino. So anyway, this metamodernism as a period began about 20 years ago and continues into the present. And one particular modernist, postmodern polarity that comes up in metamodernist works is truth versus the deconstruction of truth, and that's kind of what got us interested in your Deep Reckonings project, Stephanie.
Nice.
Yeah, and of course there are a bunch of other aesthetic methods besides the braiding of epistemic perspectives, which we deal with on our website, whatismetamodern.com. And we may hit on some of these in our conversation today as well, but this braiding of sensibilities is one of the things, like as said, we noticed in Deep Reckonings, this deep fakery and truth-telling. It really piqued our curiosity as metamodern culture scouts.
Totally.
Yeah, so we'd like to jump in and just ask you how you came up with the idea of Deep Reckonings and maybe give the audience a little bit more information about them in general.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just have to say, what a luxury to have both of you kind of taking a look at my work and reflecting back to me what you see through a metamodern lens, which is a lens I don't have much expertise in or much experience with. So what a gift. How awesome is this?
Yeah.
I feel like it really is such a luxury for me. So as far as where Deep Reckonings comes from, yeah, for the last 4 years, I have produced a podcast called Reckonings, which explores how we change our hearts and minds. So every episode tells the story of someone who made some kind of a transformation from, a deeply conservative congressman who made what he calls a spiritual conversion on climate change, to a white supremacist who managed to transcend a life of hate, to one of the recent episodes was the architect of Facebook's business model, who realized he was addicted to his phone and had a reckoning and has since devoted his life to tackling technology addiction. So it's been a motley crew of characters, but the through line has really been an exploration of this question: how do people change, and more specifically, how do people change in ways that connect to or scale into broader social and political change? And from the early days of the show, I've had this kind of moonshot wish list of guests, of people and really public figures who I thought that their personal transformation would especially kind of scale into or connect to broad-based social change. And when we think of social change, or when I think of social change, I think of social movements. I think of the civil rights movement. I think of situations in which lots and lots and lots of people are agitating for social change. But the reckonings question is who are the fewest number of people? Like, who are the fewest people that if they had some kind of personal reckoning, that in itself would translate into social change? If Charles Koch had a reckoning, it would literally change the climate trajectory of our planet. And so I was kind of, I have this wish list of guests, and I'm kind of fantasizing. I was just imagining I didn't even know what to call it. It was like a synthetic film. It was some kind of film about Charles Koch's personal transformation and how it ended up changing the world. And then I discovered the phenomenon of deepfakes, which, for people who don't know what those are, deepfakes is basically fake video, where you can make it look like someone is saying or doing something that they never said or did. My kind of fantasy film about Charles Koch, it was like, you could actually do that. You could actually make, a film of Charles, like with Charles Koch, of him having this crisis of conscience and how that ended up changing the world. And so I decided to do an audio prototype on reckonings. I released an imaginary reckoning with Pope Francis, with the Pope. So I wrote a script for the Pope. I had a voice actor perform it. I had no idea what listeners were going to say. I'd never released fiction on the show. And to my surprise, listeners really loved it. And I even heard from survivors of clergy sex abuse who, knowing that it was fake, found it really helpful to hear the imaginary Pope say the kinds of things that they would love to hear the real Pope say. So I was like, okay, I think this has legs. So then it just became a matter of, funding and the resources and the right tech partners. So Deep Reckonings is basically the culmination of a years-long exploration of how people change, and just this notion of kind of purposeful fiction, like you said, kind of the bringing together, fakery, but with an element of, fake but true, like true in the sense of it can actually truly serve us, even if it is imaginary. And so, yeah, Deep Reckonings is a series of deep fakes that make it very clear that they are fake, that imagine Mark Zuckerberg, Brett Kavanaugh, and Alex Jones having a reckoning. And again, it's absolutely explicit that the videos are fake, not just because I am not interested in deceiving anyone, but also because that's kind of part of the power of the medium, is that you can know that it's fake and it still influences you. Or they can be fake, but they can still be saying things that are, Alex Jones says in his, like, this is fake but true. So there is that, I don't remember exactly what you called it, an epistemic kind of juxtaposition there. But I guess just to kind of conclude with the two intentions of the project are, one, to just give us we're all very used to the deny and deflect playbook in the Trump era, in terms of how public figures respond to credible accusations of wrongdoing. So one intention is just to make another playbook, like make a new way, create a new way that public figures might respond to credible accusations of wrongdoing. That's more beautiful, more powerful, more stunning than the deny and deflect thing, such that if Kavenaugh, Zuckerberg, or Jones were to watch his video, that would inspire them to say, that is the me that I want to be, and ultimately really just like to make more room for ourselves to grow in public. So that's one intention. And the second intention is really just, I know I'm working with a provocative medium here. It's also an extraordinarily powerful medium. And I do believe there is more potential for using deepfakes in not even just ethical, but benevolent ways. And so with Deep Reckonings, I'm looking to kind of carve out or expand the potential for using deepfakes in what we might call pro-social ways.
Mm-hmm.
Did I ever knowingly sexually assault anyone? Absolutely not. Not in high school, not ever. Did I ever do anything that I didn't think was sexual assault, but might be sexual assault in the way we rightly understand it today?
Yeah, there are a couple things about the project and the reactions that you've had, the reaction that I had to it personally, that are really stunning. To me, it seems like it's not just changing the minds of people who we disagree with. Maybe this applies more to your whole body of work than these 3 Deep Reckonings that you've produced so far, but that there's a kind of evening of the playing field, I feel like, in that there's a sense that we're drawing a playing field where truth and non-truth can live together, can be mixing together. And then also there's one that it may be just a visceral feeling that I have, that it seems like when someone tells the truth, it ignites an empathy kind of spark or something in many of us. I think that's, more than just a personal thing. I think that's a neurological thing. And it sends a sense that, oh, that could be me, in a way, like a real humble human, a kind of humanizing moment, even if the person is somebody whom you won't encounter in your life. I'm not planning to see Mark Zuckerberg in my lifetime, or do the things that he has done, or try to undo the things, or anything like that. But I can still find where that meets my own sense of humanness.
I'm going to respond to that. My son seems to have woken up, so I'm going to just put him in the carrier.
Okay.
And then I'm going to respond. So I will be right back.
Okay.
This is Axel.
Hi.
Oh, hi,
Welcome to What is Metamodern. It will probably come so much more intuitively to him than to me. because he'll just like grow up swimming in it.
Yeah.
But in response to your question, yeah, I mean, with Reckonings, you know, what I learned to say, you know, so many of my guests, I kind of half joke, like if I sat down next to them at a party and like learned a little bit about them, I would get up and walk away. You know, but in the context of interviewing them, I'm in interview mode, so I dig in, and I'm trying to understand. And what I learned to say is, I may not have compassion for what you did. On the contrary, I may completely abhor what you did, but I can find compassion for why you did it. And the reason you did it is probably something I can really relate to, because you were seeking love or belonging or self-actualization, or, you know, Maslow's hierarchy. Like, you were seeking something that I, as a fellow human, also seek. When it comes to Deep Reckonings, it actually goes further. I feel like what's the most subversive about the project is that we're not only letting these people apologize, we're actually letting them like look good doing it, like take leadership doing it, like drop some wisdom doing it.
Yeah. I have so many different thoughts. So I just thought it was interesting that, like, as you're describing what Kavanaugh and Zuckerberg and Jones said, you know, somebody that isn't familiar with the project might be actually thinking that they actually said that. And because even when you're talking about your own project, it's like the speech that they made has become so real, and the character, the version of their character that comes through is so vivid that it's like it even convinces you who made it. It's just kind of how it comes across to me when you talk about it. And I found
I'm very aware they did not say these things, but I will
right.
say it couldn't help but change my relationship
Yes.
with men.
Yeah. And when I was watching, I was especially struck with this on the Zuckerberg one, but all three, but particularly with the Zuckerberg, you know, and for the benefit of our audience, like, she makes a really clear from the beginning that it's not real, with a, you know, statement of a visual text statement. And you know that, but then at some point I caught myself with, especially with the Zuckerberg one, forgetting that and emotionally thinking like, oh, I knew there was a guy like that inside him. This is the real Mark Zuckerberg. This is really interesting, you know. And then I was like, oh, no, it's a fake. Oh, she got me, you know. But and then at the end, in each of them, you have the character say to the audience, I'm not real. This is not real. And so it's like ethical fakery. Um, and then here's kind of where the metamodernism comes in. So if it was just fakery without the ethical part, which would be very common in a postmodern art project, the point of it would be to debunk something, or show the falsity of, you know, maybe calling into question the reliability of video transcription in general, or, you know, is anybody really ever speaking the truth? No, it's all just, that would be kind of the point. But since you are totally upfront with the fact that it's fake from the beginning, you're not tricking anybody, you're not trying to pull the wool over the viewer's eyes, you're not trying to trick people into thinking that these guys actually said it and somehow like subvert their agenda, and you're definitely not trying to make them look bad, you're trying to make them look good. And so it's this, as we said, this braiding of using a kind of postmodern trick in the service of a, you know, very earnest, visionary kind of transformational project. And that's one of the ways that it seems metamodern to me.
Yes. And that's why I mean, it's like, I see this more in the vein of virtual reality therapy. It's like people who are in a virtual reality, they know that it's virtual. They know that it's not real. And yet it still helps them overcome PTSD. Like
Yeah.
it's not, I don't need to pretend it's fake in order for it to have the power to do the thing that I'm trying to have it do. Exactly. So, but, you know, but the question does come up, like, what if Alex Jones pretending that his deep reckonings was real helped him
Right.
stop broadcasting lies?
Right.
Or like more like a placebo effect. What if him just not refusing to tell us whether it was real or not is what helped him stop broadcasting lies? Like, would we sacrifice that enormous, the social value that would come along with that, just for the sake of truth, because truth is somehow like the pinnacle of all that. Like, you can see how truth is in tension with other values that we have, which my son really agrees with. And so it's not like, it's easy to draw the ethical line, and that is where I draw it at, whether a deep fake makes explicit that it's fake or not. And yet, what if not making that explicit actually resulted in more social progress, or whatever we call that, like resulted in more of another value that we hold?
Well, I think that it's in that on the one hand, you can make it very explicit that it's fake, and you can kind of contribute to and support the audience's sense of grounding and sense of not being gaslighted, that we're all in on the thing together. Like you're not wielding power over the others by controlling the fakery. They're in on it too. So you got that, and then at the same time, it's sort of maybe you're making an invitation for the world at large, which might even include Alex Jones himself, an invitation to inhabit the imaginary reality that you're making, and kind of like oscillating between those two, kind of the ethical responsibility of making it very clear what the truth is, but the invitation into the fiction, and having them side by side. That to me would be a metamodern kind of resolution of
Yeah,
that.
actually, I'll just throw in here too that dovetails with the birth, the transition or shift into metamodernism as taking place during a time period of social media norms changing how we deal with identity. So I've used the term before, fluid identity narratives, that the fact that we exist on multiple platforms these days, we recognize, and especially younger people who've grown up in this reality, that they recognize they exist here as this person and over here as that person, and they have these sort of cultivated, identity slivers in each of these, and none of them is, well, I shouldn't say none of them is fake, because they may say some of them are overtly fake, or they may have some of them that are cultivated to be this much true or this much fake or whatever. But in any case, they make up a kind of a composite, including the imagination or the imaginary of that individual. And that more and more, as I say, is something that we deal with on a daily basis, and it's more and more normative. So your use of this technology to create something that slides between fake and real, and it has multiple possible outcomes or rollouts, seems really to work of a piece with the metamodern epistemic shift.
Yeah, I love that. Well, not having kind of multiple slivers of personality actually sounds more representative of who we are. Like, we are so much more complex than like the narrow way we choose to define ourselves on one social media for one, the way I define myself on LinkedIn,
Right.
obviously that's just like a narrow slice for professional purposes than the way I choose to define myself on Instagram. So the fact that we have these different venues to kind of express different aspects of ourselves sounds actually more representative of who we are. And when it comes to the imaginal, I mean, I on the website, I at the end of, I think it was the statement that I wrote on kind of the pro-social potential of deepfakes, I write about a little bit about visualization within the context of meditation. So, you know, it's a practice to kind of help you kind of let's say like actualize ways that you want to be. And so you visualize, but the end of the visualization is always coming back to the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And maybe one more piece to throw in there too, that you're talking about meditation made me think of is one of the dots I'm trying to connect with metamodernism and the current spiritual but not religious, as kind of a newer version of the new age, which incorporates even more, a whole nother generation of people who've grown up with certain Asian philosophic concepts or meditation practices. You know, be here now, or be in the present, be in the moment, is something that rolls off, most of our lips these days without very much trouble, but that certainly was not always the case. There is a historiographical, trajectory that undergirds people understanding some of these concepts that feel very native to us now. And one of them is this kind of, you can call it a witness consciousness, or you can call it a meta perspective, so that we can stand back and see the different threads of being doing their thing and watch them go, and be, aware and maybe attached in a way to them, but not investing our entire ego on one of these selves.
I love that. I'd never made that connection between, the meta awareness that comes with mindfulness and meditation, and the meta of metamodernism. So that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
The way I view it is that they each have helped instantiate the other. And I think the other piece, along with this historical trajectory of the East coming West, if you will, is that a lot of these very ancient concepts and ancient pieces of wisdom are met with very contemporary impulses or creations that are in popular culture. So there's a kind of whole body of study in religious studies, my field, that talks about how there's a dual re-scripting going on. There's a re-scripting of the sacred by popular culture, showing us its various versions of the sacred, sometimes highly marketed and sometimes highly detraditionalized, so they don't look very much like where they started. But be that as it may, there's a re-scripting of the sacred by pop culture, and then there's a re-scripting of contemporary culture by this ancient thread that's come into our historical present. So that takes us off on a bit of a tangent there.
Okay, I'm going to try to respond to that and then circle it back to some other thoughts I had about Deep Reckonings. So we talk about metamodernism being all the impulses of metamodernism cultural product always have something to do with protecting interiority or delving into interiority, and in resistance to the modernist tendency to say, like, everything's just kind of objective and scientific and you can reduce it all to physics, and the postmodern.
Everything's universal.
Mm-hmm.
Or everything's universal. Everything should universally relate to all cultures and all people. Yeah,
the universal objective truth. And then there's the postmodern tendency to say, like, there is no truth and it's all relative and it all depends on your perspective. And if you look at any purported truth closely enough, you'll see that it contains the seeds of its own refutation and all that. And the metamodern view is kind of like, I get that, and I get what you're saying over here, but what it really boils down to for me is what I feel inside. And Linda, what you were talking about this, joint mutual effect of the Eastern wisdom traditions with the Western popular culture, is it's like by re-scripting the Eastern traditions into pop culture terms, it brings them into that interior actual experience that people have. Because in the West, even probably if you're like, somebody that takes meditation classes and does yoga and stuff like that, in the West, in this time, you think in terms of the cartoons that you watched when you were a kid, and the music that's playing on the radio when you're driving a car, and the movies that you watch and all that. And so merging the Eastern culture into that stuff, I'm trying to go, I think I'm getting somewhere with this. Merging the culture, the Eastern stuff, it becomes less like this thing that's over there in some specialized place, and it brings it into the interior of what people's actual experience is like. And that's kind of connects to something I wanted to say still about the Deep Reckonings work. So, you know, Stephanie, you were kind of like exploring this ethical, or just this kind of question about, you know, do we work in the service of truth, or do we work in the service of kind of like what we envision and imagine and aspire to? And I you know, I just putting it back in terms of this kind of modernism, postmodern, metamodernism thing, I think, you know, the modernist viewpoint would say, like, let's really get at the truth. Let's strip away all the bullshit and all the facades that people might use to trick us. And, you know, and here's what's really true. And then the postmodern would go like, hey man, it doesn't really matter to what's true because nothing's true anyway. And then the metamodern would be like, we're not going to forget the true reality. Nobody's going to actually trick us into losing our hold on the truth. And we know that other people have other versions of the truth, but when it comes down to it, it's what I feel inside is where I find my truth. And I think that with the artistry involved, like one thing that distinguishes your Deep Reckonings from just somebody writing a little essay, like a Medium article or something, and saying, here's what I wish, Mark Zuckerberg would say, with the artistry of combining the technology of the visual and the skill of the voice actors, because those are voice actors.
Yes.
Yeah. And those voice actors were incredible. Like, I mean, maybe if I heard them side by side with the real people, I'd see the differences, but I didn't for a moment get taken out of the scene, you know.
Oh, wow.
By the voice actors. And then the third strand of it is your actual writing. That's why it's art, not just sort of like somebody putting some ideas out there. Like, you create a little world where for a moment these people have these feelings that they want to share, and I have a reaction to them that's my genuine reaction, and then you very responsibly take me out of that, what could be considered a guided meditation or whatever, in the end, and now I'm back in reality, and it's just kind of all there.
Totally. Yeah. No, and back at, it's funny. I was thinking in terms of visualization and meditation, but I didn't even kind of make that connection with because then the coming back to reality is the call to action is now, right? Is like tweet at, you know, Chris Cox to ask him to ask Mark Zuckerberg to make the real version. You know, each one ends with the call to action, which is kind of which is exactly the like coming back to reality post visualization. And I don't know. Also, just to respond to the, like you were connecting it to the, you know, modern, postmodern, metamodern. So the tradition. I don't know if we want to go here yet, but the philosophical tradition I come from, integral thinking, what it would say in response, that like its way of articulating that would be, yeah, it's not like truth or it's not modern or metamodern. It's under what circumstances is which way of treating truth helpful for doing whatever it is that we're trying to do. And whatever it is we're trying to do may not always be tell the truth. Whatever it is we're trying to do may be help Alex Jones, or encourage, or whatever, get Alex Jones to stop broadcasting lies and misinformation into our public infosphere, you know, like, so it's, you know, sometimes what is most helpful for achieving our goal is truth. Sometimes it might be what we could call a purposeful fiction, is that is explicit about its truthness or its fakery, or at least like uses fakery in service of something else, which isn't, just straight up deceit.
Yeah, so I'd like to also talk about your whole Reckonings project, which again is not the same as your Deep Reckonings, but I think there's that thread that runs through, that at least what feels like it runs through a lot of your work really is trying to get at the why of beliefs and patterns and behaviors, but also getting to the nitty-gritty of what's missing or possible. Like those are two sides of a coin of like, if some ingredient in this were different, or if people were able to see this perspective, or if people were able to see each other's perspectives in general, then what would be possible? So they're all like ways of offering windows into each other's worlds and each other's worldviews. And I feel like, I think we share, it seems to me, a sense that behind all that is this appreciation that everybody's story, makes up this tapestry, and that accessing this cosmic tapestry is actually transformational. It's so mundane because it's just the world and our stories and what happens to us on a day-to-day basis, and when we lie and when we reckon, but it can be this huge transformative event, as big as any religious transformation, which tends to feel like a transcendence that takes us up and away from the world. But this is an earth-based, I call it a metamodern soteriology, because it's a ground-based level possibility of transformation. And you've addressed sort of like what you feel like is at stake with these works for you.
Let's remind for our viewers what the Reckonings project was, as distinct from the Deep Reckonings that we've just been talking a whole bunch.
Yeah, give us a few examples if you'd like to.
Oh yeah, so Reckonings, a podcast that tells the stories of people who've shifted their political worldviews, transcended extremism, made all kinds of transformative change. And yes, the way that you just articulate metamodern soteriology. Oh, I have to look into
fancy jargon word for salvation narrative.
Huh. The way I have thought about it is so biofeedback. Biofeedback is like, just by virtue of witnessing our physiological processes, we are capable of influencing our physiological, which is wild when you think about it. And I think about Reckonings, it's almost like a social, it's like biofeedback at the societal level, like by virtue of collectively witnessing how we change, how we learn and grow and evolve, we become more capable of learning and growing and evolving. I really do. I do believe that. I do believe that I had like that, which exhibits a lot of faith in human beings. But I do believe that. I do have that faith in our capacity to just by virtue of seeing ourselves clearly, like having the capacity to, and like that enhancing our capacity to learn and grow and evolve. So
yeah, and that is, of course, a very refreshing perspective, I think, in this day and age of feeling pretty, sometimes fairly resolute about the the difficulty of dealing with all the lying, for example.
It was very personally helpful that I happened to start that Reckonings like a bit before Trump was elected. That it has really helped me maintain my faith in humanity during an otherwise challenging time.
I imagine.
At the risk of kind of like cartoonizing your subjects in your Reckonings interviews, or like really casting them extremely, it kind of makes me think of this sort of concept Linda and I have developed called the metamodern monster. The emphasis is just that they may very well be a bad person. You may very much disagree with their views, and no amount of dialoguing and mimetic mediation is ever going to change your disagreement with them. In any case, though, there's still a person with a story that matters.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in one of the ones that I listened to of your Reckonings podcast was, I think it was episode 21, with the man and the woman who had been involved in a sexually abusive situation. And then they have had many conversations with each other since and kind of come to some kind of reconciliation. And nobody in it ever says like, well, I understand why you did that. It's all very expected and stuff. So it's still just held as a truth that he shouldn't have done what he did. And at the same time, it's held as a truth that his story is interesting and part of the story of the tapestry of the human experience.
Yeah. I mean, and that to me is also integral. Again, like we don't need to choose between being a monster or, you know, like being a human. You know, and like, I think of it in terms of we don't need to choose between compassion and consequences. It's like you should, you know, like endure the consequences appropriate to the impact of your behavior and have the opportunity to change, you know, and for your sake and for all of ours. So, you know, because often it's like, you know, restorative justice, are we like letting the person off the hook? But just because you're sitting in jail doesn't mean you can't work to repair the harm you caused. Traditional criminal justice and restorative justice can go hand in hand. They're not mutually exclusive. So yeah, there's we can think of it as metamodern. I think of it as integral, but yeah, there's like you don't necessarily have to choose between one or the other, between the monster or the human.
Yeah, and even maybe to put even a finer point on it, in terms of our metamodern monsters kind of schema, we talk about how the same character, the same person, the protagonist even, may be monstrous at some points, may exhibit monstrous behaviors, and then other very valued and laudable behaviors. And then the monsters in most narratives up until the metamodern kind of period, in terms of pop cultural representations of monsters, we don't see them having, they might have a few human characteristics, or you might be a bit sympathetic toward them, but they aren't usually able to be the protagonist at times.
And they don't have, they don't have like a complicated backstory. They don't have like a complicated interiority. They serve a function in the plot,
right.
So that the good guys or the good gals can do the things that they're doing and go through their journey. But in a metamodern story, the monsters are characters. The monsters are people too, and the hero, or the main character of the story, may still have the mission of destroying them, you know, and killing them. But even up to that moment, the monster is a full-fledged person.
Yeah. I mean, this might be too obvious of a suggestion, but it would be awesome to do a metamodern analysis of the evolution of Disney movies' bad guys. I mean, having young kids now, like the bad guys are not what they used to be. I mean, Moana's bad guy, I don't know if you've seen Moana.
I don't know contemporary Disney.
Oh, that would be really fun.
But in a way that would be kind of to come at it and looking at it fresh, having not seen them, you know, with that could be cool.
Disney is really learning how to deal with the bad guy in a metamodern way, and it's very awesome. Yeah.
When you get to Monsters, Inc., you have a shift there that's pretty marked, and allows children, I think, obviously, to see a monster as somebody that has feelings and can be friendly and can be on the side of good and all that kind of stuff. And now you can even find monster camps that kids can go to, and the themes of the camps, or the daily themes are, you know, like vegetarian monsters and monsters who are sad, or, you know, and it's really, you know, some ways subverting the whole idea, like, are we then, you know, if not to get Jungian, but are we, if we just, you know, wash out the shadow side altogether, does that mean it's not going to exist anymore? And, you know, how do we take up the monster
Right.
in this day and age if we're going to wash out the monstrous parts of monsters? Whole other idea, but maybe one that, you know, it is to be explored when it comes to, you know, things like the reckonings. Where does the monstrous part of the human being go?
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
absorbs that or absolves that?
I think some people would probably say the monster goes to the behavior, like actions and behaviors are monstrous, but the entity itself is human. But I want to think about that. That's like an intuitive answer, but
Yeah.
there may be more to it.
So another piece of your work that I was kind of captured by, this YouTube figure, Contrapoints, or Natalie Wynn. You have video essays describing some of the social media conflicts that have occurred around the perspective given by this figure. Contrapoints seems to be how someone can explore really sticky issues in identity politics and bring, again, as the theme we're talking about here, bring several identities outward in performances that honor them rather than tearing them down to declare one of them as the winner. Even as this is a trans woman who has a lot at stake in these debates. So she takes them both as an opportunity to be creative and to be very funny and humorous and crass and biting and sardonic and loving and vulnerable. And so all of that strikes me as metamodern, that she can participate in this kind of analysis while some aspects of herself are, they're acting out parts of herself while she's also analyzing in a way that avoids tearing anything down, I guess. So to me, there's an ironicity there. That's one of Greg's coinages that's particularly useful to look at the playful use of identities and personal self-reflection and not shying away from those difficult emotions like embarrassment. And there seems to be a lot of heart and honesty, which to me comes across as a kind of faith in humanity, I guess I would say, with her work. And your analysis of it, in putting it in context for us of what happens on social media, was, I think, really useful for a lot of people.
I guess I think especially of her Jordan Peterson video. So like she mocks him, and she kind of calls him a daddy.
Yeah.
But then she mocks herself, and she kind of presents herself as this woman who has this kind of like uncontrolled sort of lust for daddy figures. And she weaves that in while critiquing the actual substance of his ideas. And then, you know, kind of backing away from some of the sardonic, biting stuff and kind of still having a sympathy for him and seeing the person in the monster. And there's just this oscillation. We often say braiding of the sensibilities, but a lot of the other metamodern theorists use the term oscillation between these sensibilities. There's just this back and forth oscillation between now I'm being serious, now I'm joking, now I'm mocking the figure, now I'm mocking my own reaction to the figure.
And appreciating the figure too. She actually
appreciating the figure. So all that is just this kind of big metamodern braid.
Yes.
For me.
Yeah, I definitely see the like dripping in ironicity. But I mean, but ultimately, like she wouldn't, I mean, I feel like the overarching, like there's the humor and there's the sarcasm, and she's seducing Jordan Peterson while sitting in her bathtub. And like she would not be putting all of this work into her videos unless she actually cared. So like, I feel like the overarching umbrella, and this is the case with Deep Reckonings too, is like, is, you know, and maybe metamodernism, and I don't know, like the overarching umbrella is still like, in service of something of like, of us, or of some kind of like social value, you know? Yeah. So like you can, right? Like even if there's going to be some playfulness and or irony or whatever, joking, like it's in service of,
Right.
you know, like a bigger aspiration.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I mean, I definitely found myself caring for the characters in the Reckonings. Especially notable was for Brett Kavanaugh, who I probably have like the most sort of visceral hatred for of the three of them, because
Yeah.
Alex Jones just seems ridiculous,
Yeah.
and Mark Zuckerberg has done a lot of good along with a lot of his bad, and he's pretty good at kind of presenting like a smooth social thing. But Brett Kavanaugh I just sort of saw as this like bastard previously.
Yeah.
And in your Reckoning, like I felt his heart, and it felt real, like it was contiguous with my impression of his person that I've seen in real life.
That's the one that people felt the most emotional about, actually. Yeah.
Well, in terms of the other Reckonings, I have yet to watch them all, and you have a lot of material that I'm looking forward to digging into and spending time with. Is a lot. So, but what I have noticed is the tendency, which I also would think of as Metamodern, is to not need things to tie up in a neat bow, not need to tie up uncomfortable, difficult scenarios and emotional states as if it's all done and all capped off. And I think that for some people who, I could guess that the people who might have problems with, or possibly say, you know, well, you're just letting them off the hook or letting them be a good person. That's not something that you should do. They're very bad, and etc. They might be unfamiliar, you know, with this. This is why I feel that it is important to see it as an epistemic shift and group metamodernism with the modern, the postmodern, etc., as this large umbrella term that helps us see what's going on underneath and behind the scenes or right in front of our faces, politically, socially, etc. And it's like, I think one of your commenters actually on one of your videos about Contrapoints said that they could see how it would appear somewhat alien to some people who are usually seeing or invested in a strategy of supporting one outcome, one version of right or wrong, political YouTube viewers who want to say, this is the right point of view and I'm going to fight for it. But this metamodern sensibility, the more it interweaves and is recognized in contemporary culture, it allows this kind of softening into sorts of perspectives that it's actually, I don't know, again, I've said like moving and very human in some ways to hang out in this third position of don't know or provisional truths.
Totally.
So it feels to me like Contrapoints is showing people who enjoy her are probably picking up on the metamodern sensibility and saying,
yeah, her debates don't conclude with someone winning.
Yeah.
And it's because there is, you know, she is seeing the partial truth. I mean, and it's not just like every, like the postmodern, hey man, I'm just going to use the hey man like you did, you know, hey man, every view has some partial truth to it, and some views are more true than others. Like her debates, it's like, you know, some of the characters get more points, let's say, some views do have more validity, and there isn't necessarily like the one and only winner at the end, which is both accurate and really helpful to like you said, just like sit with the like unresolvedness.
Harry LARPing. You make me sound like the self-indulgent one. I'm sorry I'm not hard-working enough to go to brunch dates and cocktail parties with transphobes. I've seen minds change and hearts soften before my eyes. You don't win friends and allies with a bat. They're just using you. Well, who do you think benefits and who do you think gets hurt when you go out into the world and represent trans women as masculine and violent? Who do you think benefits when they trot you out to be feminine and meek and acquiescent?
From my point of view, what she's offering is not an answer to the questions, but like a look into the reality of being her or being many people who are honestly dealing with these confusing questions where there is, so it's like The
You can
purpose
find
of her
yourself
videos,
somewhere.
the purpose of her videos, except for like a few of them where I think she has like an explicit point. She does have some where she has like a pretty explicit point to make. Like she had a video called Vote, and she was
Right.
fully openly trying to
There
convince.
was no character playing the
Yeah.
not vote. Yeah.
But
Yes.
in these kinds of ones that we're talking about, where she has all these characters, it's the purpose isn't to convince you of one of the points. The purpose, it's like it's art. So it's art. So it's just like saying, this is what the present moment is like. The present moment is this confusing conflict between some variously convincing points of view on the particular question that I'm in.
Well, and I think the view that ends up being presented is the emergence of is like is the dialogue between all the steel manned instead of straw manned, all the
Right.
steel manned or steel trans, as someone
steel
said
trans.
steel trans versions of all the ways of seeing. Like
Right.
that ends up being the perspective that ends up emerging is everyone's steel transed view on the issue.
And that's a protection of interiority. That's an example, or could be seen as an example of that metamodern, quality or characteristic of protecting everyone's interiority. Which, for some people, again, it's harder to swallow that. Some people who appear as bad actors in our current day also have an interiority that they may be trying to protect. So for some people, they take metamodernism to be a progressive, often leftist kind of project toward, some kind of a world saving or socially, it's steered toward a goal of socially coming out in a specific place. Whereas for us, it's really important to see metamodernism again as aligned with the category of thing that it's aligned with is the modern, the postmodern. And those are huge umbrella terms that show us things that are positive and negative based on the point of view of a leftist. They may be not at all left-wing, but they're still protecting interiority in some way. Like there's some things about our current president who, which could be seen as stemming from the metamodern time period. I do not think that person could have been elected if we didn't have this epistemic shift to metamodernism. And so for a lot of people, that's going to be confrontive, and they're going to say, oh, well, metamodernism has to be a nice thing. It has to be a good thing. It has to be on the side of good and not evil. So that's not right. And that's why we try to say, look under the umbrella of what this large, epistemic shift is bringing. It certainly isn't all positive. The part where multi-perspectivalism, showing the ability to hold lots of points of view, is sometimes taken as a metamodern quality, and it's often described as something that fits in with integral theory. But it's not metamodernism per se. We've sort of opined that it could be that it originated under and considered a hallmark of postmodernism in a way.
Well, I think, just to be blunt, I think it's usually the people who are coming to metamodernism from integral who conflate the two, and they think metamodernism is multi-perspectivalism, which I think multi-perspectivalism is much more a central part of integral. Whereas, so Timotheus Vermeulen and Robin van Denneker, who are kind of the people who wrote one of the seminal articles on metamodernism in 2010, they emphasized this term oscillation, but it needs to be clarified that what they were talking about was specifically oscillation between postmodern sensibilities and modern sensibilities, not just oscillation between Republican and Democrat or chocolate and vanilla or any given pair of dualities. And I think the sort of general, kind of incorporation of opposing dualities is, we could call that multi-perspectivalism. And I think that's where the integral people have sort of latched into metamodernism, but not quite really understood what it was meant to go for.
Yeah, I mean, if I were to kind of like come down on this somewhere, I agree that the people who come to metamodernism from integral, I think it's probably as simple as kind of where we were at before with you see metamodernism as a descriptive phenomenon. It's not about the world we want. It's describing something that is happening.
Right.
And that's it. And we can like what's happening, parts of what's happening. We can not like parts of it, in the same way that we like some movies and not others. So it's just a descriptive phenomenon. But whereas integral, and perhaps the people who kind of are like theorizing about metamodern from integral, see it as a normative phenomenon,
right.
as like a way to see the world that is, that is desirable. So it might be just as simple as descriptive versus normative.
Or you could say another way of putting that is that the metamodern umbrella has underneath it many different types of phenomena of social problem solving, including those that the neo-integral culture find themselves doing.
I think that normative versus descriptive is one part of the difference between metamodernism and integral, but there's more to it than that, actually.
And that should probably be its own, that could totally be its own.
That's a whole other conversation.
Can of worms.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Stephanie, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. And thank you for your work in general. It's just, I hope that, if this video does anything, it gets people over to your various projects, channels, podcasts, to be able to see these works for themselves.
Thank you. Thank you, Greg and Linda.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's, again, it's what a luxury to have you review my work and just like give me a new way to see it and understand it, and even think about the work that I love and why I love it, because I do actually think that a lot of the work I love also has a metamodern sensibility.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, well, we'll be following your work for sure, and hope we'll be staying in touch.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Axel is also saying goodbye.
Okay, bye Axel, bye Stephanie.
Bye.